Welcome at Pizza and More. Lots of people are very often asking what the level should be between bulk fermentation and boil fermentation. I'm Jürgen and we will together find out what the right level is or how the effect is if the bulk fermentation is longer or if the boil fermentation is longer. Normally if we have a longer leavening time, then I make normally a 50% and 50%, so 50% is bulk fermentation and 50% is boil fermentation. If we have a dough which raises only short, then I normally create the dough balls directly after kneading. So I knead the dough, let it rest for 30 to 60 minutes, and then I shape the dough balls. But what's now the real difference? Well, one is pretty clear. We have to shape our dough balls 8 to 6 hours before we want to bake our pizza, because otherwise the dough is not relaxed enough and we are not able to stretch the dough properly and to shape a nice round pizza. But what's now bulk fermentation and what is the boil fermentation? The bulk fermentation is the time between the kneading and between the shaping the dough balls, so the pizza balls. And the boil fermentation is then the time from shaping those dough balls, so the pizza balls, until we bake the pizza. But what's now the advantages of a longer or a shorter bulk fermentation? One is clear. If we have a very long boil fermentation, there is the possibility that the dough runs flat. Because when we do some stretch and folds with the dough, or even if we shape the dough balls after, let's say 50% of the time, we bring new energy to the dough, we bring new oxygen to the dough, so the fermentation will be, there will be more fermentation afterwards again, there will be more flavor and more aroma brought into the dough, because the microorganisms are able to work again easily because of the fresh air in the dough. The next thing is, during the bulk fermentation, the gluten structure will be strengthened as well. Well, of course, this depends also very heavily on the baking strength of the flour we use. We have to be here a bit careful, because if then this whole fermentation takes too long, the dough starts to get weak again, because the gluten structure will break. But as I said, this depends heavily on the baking strength, so on the W value of our used flour. And what should happen during the boil fermentation? Of course, during the boil fermentation, the fermentation goes ahead and the dough ripens far more, and this produces also more flavor and more taste inside or for the dough. Also during the boil fermentation, the dough should, or the balls should get relaxed, so that we are able to stretch a better pizza, or it's easier to stretch the pizza and to shape the pizza in a round form. And of course, the volume of the dough should raise, so that we have all the air inside of our dough, which we press afterwards into the crust to get an airy and fluffy crust. And what are we doing right now? I make a direct dough with 65% of hydration, and we will have a total leavening time of 48 hours. So the first dough ball I will shape directly after kneading. So I take the dough out of the machine and shape immediately one dough ball. The second pizza ball will be shaped 30 minutes after kneading. So I will take the dough out, let the dough relax, and then after 30 minutes I shape the second dough ball. After then 24 hours, so after 50% of the total leavening time, I will shape the third dough ball, and then 10 to 8 hours before baking, I will shape the rest of the dough balls. And now we start with the dough. We have here the ingredients for our dough. This is enough for shaping 6 pizza balls. The reason why I use the ingredients for 6 pizza balls is We need normally only 4 for our test, but the last one would be otherwise alone and would be automatically then in the boil fermentation, and that's the reason why I make more, so that we have also the last one then in a bulk fermentation and can bring it together with the rest into a boil fermentation. So I have here 1 kilo, so 1000 grams of type 00 flour with 14% of protein. I have here then 30 grams of fine sea salt, 1.25 grams of dry yeast. If you want to use fresh yeast, then please use 3.75 grams, and I have 675 grams of very cold water, which leads then to a hydration of 65%. I will now pour at first all the water into the bowl of the mixer, then followed by the whole flour and adding the yeast. Then I knead everything for around 10 minutes. Then I add the salt, and then I continue kneading until the window test works, and then we continue with shaping the first dough ball. My dough is now ready. The total kneading time was around 25 minutes. I show you now that the window test works, which means I take a piece of dough, I shape a ball, and then I stretch it. And if this is possible, to stretch it very thin, then the dough is ready kneaded and we can continue. And by the way, it's not necessary that you write down everything, so the recipe and so on, because the recipe and the whole procedure is in the video description. And as already said, without shaping here anything, I take directly a piece of dough, and it should have 290 grams, and I shape a pizza ball. There is now the first pizza ball with 290 grams, and this is the rest of the dough, also shaped to a nice big ball. Now I let it rest for 30 minutes. I cover it that it will not dry out, and in 30 minutes I create the second dough ball. 30 minutes are over, and now I can shape the second dough ball. I will now remove from this big one 290 grams, and then I shape this one new. And as I already said, this one is the dough I prepared already 30 minutes ago. This one is the new shaped dough ball, and here we have the rest of the dough. Now it's important to close again the lid, and then I let this dough rise for another 1 hour at room temperature, and then I will put it into the fridge for round about 24 hours. As you can see here, I already shaped all pizza balls right now. This one, which I shaped after 24 hours of leavening time, I didn't switch on the camera because I did not really want to bore you, because it was only shaping one pizza ball. These 3 pizza balls were shaped right now. This one is a bit smaller. This one has only 250 grams. All the others have 290 grams. But you can see now already the difference between the dough balls. This one, which I shaped directly after kneading, is far flatter than this one, where I waited 30 minutes before I shaped it. This one is then this from yesterday evening, so 24 hours leavening time. So you can see here already a difference. And now I will cover it again with the lid. I will put it back into the fridge for several hours, and then round about 6 hours before baking I will take it out of the fridge. Yeah, and then we will see in some hours what the result is when we bake the pizza. Everything is prepared to bake the 4 pizza. The oven is prepared, all the toppings are prepared, the dough is here, it looks pretty good, but I think there is some difference in the dough balls. I will show you this in a second. Otherwise, I think we start immediately with baking the pizzas. And these are now the dough balls. And you see definitive difference. This one was immediately after kneading, this one after 30 minutes, this one after 24 hours, and these 3 were actually 10 hours ago. This one is the smaller one, what I already said, with 250 grams, but these 2 have 290 grams. And you can see this dough ball, which I made immediately after kneading, is far flatter than these 2. I think these 2 are definitely with far more air inside than this one and also this one. However, this one, which I made 30 minutes after kneading, is still with more volume than this one. And I think this one, which I made after 24 hours, has almost the same volume than this 2. So I would say if we make the dough after, if we make the dough ball after 24 hours or then even 10 hours later, it doesn't really matter. But I think these 2 have the most volume. We will see right now how it will be when we bake the pizza, but one is clear. When we work with the pizza with the dough once again after 24 hours or even after or now 10 hours ago, due to this reason that I make the dough again, I form the dough, I shape the dough, I bring fresh air and fresh oxygen inside of the dough, you see the microorganism and the yeast gets more activity, and this is the reason why these dough balls are definitely with more volume than this one. But now I will start with baking the pizzas. The first result after stretching this dough, this pizza is now made from the dough where I shaped the ball directly after kneading. Stretching worked absolutely fantastic, great, super elastic dough, absolutely nothing to complain. And now I put it into the oven. Here we have right now the first result. I would say all great. Maybe these dark bubbles, but okay, these bubbles came up. But otherwise I would say this is exactly a pizza like we want a pizza. It's crispy, it's full of air. I would say a great result. As I do not really want to wait until all 4 are ready, so I cut it already a piece of the crust. And I taste now the crust, because you know the crust has, from a dough's perspective, the most taste, and that's the reason why I taste now the crust. And this is exactly how I expected it. It tastes fantastic. Well, it has a 48 hours leavening time. And now the next one. The second one is also prepared for the oven. Nothing negative, super easy to stretch, a very elastic dough, and now it's time for the oven. And also the second pizza is now out of the oven. It looks fantastic, it smells fantastic, so I think also here nothing to complain. As with the pizza before, I taste now a piece of the crust. Also here, the crust is really very tasty. And I have to be honest, I taste not a real difference. So almost the same like the other one before. Pizza number 3 is ready for the oven. This one is the dough or the dough ball, which I shaped 24 hours after kneading. So 50% of the leavening time was bulk fermentation and 50% of the leavening time was boil fermentation. And here I have to say, from a stretching perspective, it worked absolutely great. No issues while stretching. But what I have to say, this dough is far more stable. So I had the opinion that the other dough would maybe break if you are not a bit careful, but it was no problem. But this one is far more stable and elastic. That's really a different and an advantage from my perspective. And now it comes into the oven. And also pizza number 3 is crispy, is full of air, as it should be. This is now the last pizza I taste. I only taste because the other one, the last one, I will eat in total. So I have again a piece of the crust. And I could be wrong, but I think this crust really has a little bit more flavor than the other ones. And now the last pizza is ready for the oven. You can see this is not a margherita like the others. This is now a prosciutto e funghi. So ham and mushrooms. I have to say, from a dose perspective, this one was the best to work with, I would say. There was most air inside of this dough. It was really super stable, very good to stretch. So if I would have to choose, this one is the dough which was the best to work with. And now it comes into the oven. Yes, this is now the last one, and if you would ask me from a baking experience, from a baking result, this one is the best and the nicest one. And also, as all others, I taste the crust, and I really have to say right now, this one has maybe the best taste, the best flavor. However, the difference to the pizza before is not that big. So my favorite in handling the dough would be really either to shape the dough balls 50% of the leavening time, so 24 in the case of 48 hours leavening time after 48 hours, or the best one was definitely when I shaped the pizza balls 10 hours before baking. Also from a handling, from a stability and from a flexibility of the dough, this was the best one. If you like my video, it would be fantastic if you would subscribe my channel, and then we see us also in the next video. Ciao.